Okay, so the red light is on, which means that we are all systems go. And yeah, I just want to start by thanking you, Sanjay, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join my busy schedule to share some of the wonderful highlights of your career and the work that you do at AGE UK Croydon. And I think it would be remiss of me not to say, having had the opportunity to work with you over the last year, it is a real pleasure to have this opportunity to get a bit deeper into the background of what I've been observing as we've sat on the various boards over the years. So thank you firstly, and I can't wait to get started. So yeah, could we start perhaps with the context of your journey to being CEO of AGK, and perhaps just sharing a bit about your career journey to date, because otherwise people might think that you were born a CEO and you are a CEO. So
Yeah, no, it is. There is a lot of context to this journey, and I think it'll take a long time if I ring deep, but just to give a flavor of
sure.
what this journey was all about. So when I left my corporate uh, journey, which was after probably the dot-com bubble happened, and the work I was doing along with an organization who wanted to take the product to stock exchange didn't work out. My journey in the community services started at that time, and luckily for me, I got the role within the local borough council in their community services, and the role was pretty much at the bottom of the ladder, so to say.
Mm,
But since it was a career transition, sorry, uh, it was fine with me. So the role was managing and coordinating activities across 7 older people day centers. And older people services had always been close to my heart, primarily because of my cultural bringing,
mm,
and older people connection, empathy has been pretty much through and through for a lot of the years I have been back home in India. So this role resonated for me that it will something I need to do for older people. Within about a year, I became a manager of the day center, which was to start with a part-time role. And in addition, I also was working in a charity for people with learning disabilities. So that
okay.
basically there was 2 jobs. That was managing charity shops, doing some fundraising, lots of activities around funding for the Learning Disabilities Day Center. And on the other side was managing Older People Day Center. Did that for a year, year and a half, then was promoted to manage the full-time day center within the council, which I became the manager for, and did that for nearly 5 years.
Okay.
Um, so before, and then we decided suddenly one day, not one day, but we decided to move to Canada,
Right. As you do, as you do.
right? So yeah, just packed up and moved to Canada, and again, I have been lucky in that within 3 months I got my first job, and incidentally was for older people services.
Okay. Okay. So there's something calling you to support elderly.
Yes, so there was a calling, it seems like, because that's how the cards were getting played for me.
Mm,
And that was close to Vancouver in Canada, in New Westminster, was managing pretty much very similar service what I was doing in the UK. So for me, it was very easy to get into the role and create results for the charity there. And fortunately, unfortunately for them, within a year, um, I landed a CEO job for a
right.
community services organization in Canada itself. So I had to transition my role. And in that organization, older people services was one of the streams, which, but that's my journey. There I started to learn a huge lot of other services, which is supported housing, sheltered housing, um, young people, youth services, family counseling, early years, and including winter support, winter shelter. So we did right from early year services to older people services there. So it gave me a breadth of understanding how a different kind of services to different cohorts of people
That
actually
makes
help.
sense.
And it was my first CEO role. That was itself a journey for me.
I
Also.
can imagine.
So that was done 6 years. So I think that groomed me, not just as part of the CEO role, but also groomed me into learning how to manage charities, how to manage large teams, how to grow business, how to create sustainability, and so on and so forth. Work with funders, work with government funders, work with contracts, and managing lots and lots of volunteers and fundraising efforts. So I
Okay.
think that was the basis of my CEO role. And of course, as to close the circle now, then in transition, landed in Ireland for a brief period of time. I would say brief, but it was 3 years.
All right. From Canada to Ireland, I mean,
It was primarily because my kids were in UK and they didn't want to move. So we were feeling isolated and we wanted to move back.
sure.
And there was no direct opportunity coming through, and Ireland came as the closest possible to UK. So hence, hence the Ireland.
If you can't be in the UK, then get as close as you can. Okay.
Yeah. So this was pre-COVID. So we moved there. It was fun because it was close to UK. We could come there, and we were also seeing a new country. We never lived in Ireland, so it's like, okay, let's enjoy what we have
Hmm.
and also support charity. And that was homelessness, and they also had older people services. So that older people part of it was always close in the all the charities I've worked with. Um, and the other piece was homelessness. So these were two areas which kind of became the core
I'm
part
with
of
you.
my work.
I'm with you.
And then 3 years, I got this opportunity here, which is now 3.5 years in AGE UK Croydon. And lo and behold, I'm still here.
Wow. Wow. And I mean, you say lo and behold, but I can now understand, the depth to which you were an ideal candidate for it, having emerged into that CEO role, but having had, elderly service provision under your remit before that, and then really building out that network with bodies, but also managing volunteers and wider teams. I could see why that sort of plays really well into the role that you've had now. So I wouldn't say lo and behold as if it was abracadabra. I would say that you were and are, as I know you, an excellent candidate for it. And for me, part of doing this sort of series of conversations is to really understand, the, I guess, motivations for leaders around the world from very different backgrounds, across all spectrums and walks of life, to pivot on purpose, and pivot to doing work that is impactful in some way, shape, or form. And as yours is, socially impactful. We're all going to get old one day if we're lucky, and therefore it's really critical what you do. But before you took this turn, so you talked about just very briefly, that transition post the flotation of the
Yeah.
product and not working out. What was your background, just in a nutshell? I know we don't necessarily want to go too deep into that, but what was the background, sort of professionally, that you had prior to the transition to the sort of charity sector?
It was in IT, and I started with lots of organizations. I worked over a period of time, but primarily the focus was IT training and software development. Those were the key focus. My role was not technical, though I had a fair bit of knowledge in terms of technical through education, but it was more around business development and customer interaction. Those were two focuses. When I moved to the UK, my parent company was in India, so the development happened in India, but the business was coming from UK, and my role was to have liaison between the two teams, the UK team and the India team.
Mm.
So I was the liaison between the two, and I was the liaison between the customer as well as the team, which was based at customer side, were my responsibility to ensure that they were doing their job, they were comfortable, and basically they had linkages with their company in the UK and hence in India. So that was the role. But my company in UK started to develop a point of sale system
Right.
for retail and wholesale clients. That was the product they wanted to take to London Stock Exchange, which due to the dot-com bubble did not happen.
Mhm.
And hence the company actually folded down. And that's for my transition to the
I'm with
community
you.
sector.
Well, how interesting. And so when you say point of sale, I'm sort of thinking of the likes of SumUp and Zettle and those sort of portable point of sale devices. Am
At
I on the
that
right lines
time,
with
there
some?
were large companies like Epson, there was IBM,
Wow.
who were doing products like this. And
Mhm.
we were using Oracle as the relational database at the back end. And the front end, we were using Microsoft, Visual Basic, and SQL. So it was a touchscreen system with a core back office system with the relational database. So
Mhm.
you scan your products in the back office database, and the front, of course, is a till, which is your all the
Yeah,
buttons are there. So it is pretty much what you see in retail sector or a
I'm with
wholesale
you.
cash and carries. So we were very much focused in wholesale cash and carries at
Okay.
that point in time.
Well, that is a phenomenal pivot to because I feel there are some interconnectivities, but maybe rather than make any assumption, maybe I'll ask you
Yeah.
that role, the role that you left, and the role that you now have as CEO. When you reflect back or consider, the parallels, like
Mm.
what are the similarities or the transferable skills that you
Mm.
would be able to bring forward into this role as CEO?
There are quite a few transferable skills. I feel that with my experience in the corporate world and my experience in data and technology are to some extent little less available with the sector who for CEOs who have traditionally been in the voluntary sector.
Sure.
So coming from that background, there is a natural understanding of how to run a business, um, because charity itself is still a business. You have to still make sure your bottom line is balanced.
Hmm.
Uh, the second part is that as charity transitions itself from uh, a, a service oriented, it is a service oriented business because we don't sell any products. However, data and technology are key part of the deliverables to enhance that service.
Okay.
And the third part for any kind of relationship or skill is purely around how do we keep calm in all the situation. So in a corporate world, which is highly driven on profits,
Yes.
uh, there is always a pressure to get business, right? Because if you
Hmm.
don't get business, you pretty much shut down.
That's it. That's it. That's the lifeblood of the organization for sure, the
Yeah.
sales.
So there is always a pressure. Where are we selling? Where's the next opportunity? And all that pressure is always there. Uh, Here it becomes a slightly different kind of pressure. You're not running around. Technically, you're running around business because you're still contracting. You are interacting with your funders. You want them to give you funds to do the service. So you still have to understand the lay of the land within the voluntary sector versus a corporate environment. So it is still, there are pressures there. But with the transferable skill of corporates, you try to understand how your bottom line works, and you start to understand your income and expenditure.
Makes
Whereas
sense.
a traditional voluntary sector CEO or a person who's never worked in the others would always come more from a giving perspective, right? They forget that there is still a bottom line to work on,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
Because
Do
if
that.
you don't work on that, you are making your charitable business vulnerable to shut down. And if you shut down, then all the charitable purpose is gone. So to
Mm.
achieve that, you have to ensure that your bottom line is always healthy.
That's brilliant. That makes a lot of sense to me insofar as, you know, any organization, whether it be not for profit or profit making, concerned with, you know, stakeholders from shareholders to employees, etc. They, I guess, in order to do the thing that people come there for them to do, they need sustainability to be the bedrock of it. And I think that's, I see now the connection there. And I wondered, like, if you were to look back, would you have seen yourself have been doing what you're doing now, like when you came out of university and were looking into the bright lights of the future? Was that something that was in the back of your mind at all?
Never. In India, the charitable sector is not as developed.
Right.
Over the years, probably it has, but it wasn't at that point in time when I was growing up and looking for career opportunities. It was always either I am in a corporate world or I'm in a government job. But that's what the families have been doing, and that's how the environment you tend to learn. And you say,
Right.
okay, that's where I have to go. Uh, but working in a voluntary sector was never in my head. Uh, and even when I came to UK, it was never in my head. We knew there was Heart Foundation and national charities and so on and so forth, and we would give money to them. We would interact. But will I land into the voluntary sector? No, it
No.
just happened.
And you know, that for me is part and parcel of the fascination of the human, in that, you know, when the desire to do something and use your skills and talents in a way is strong, you'll find a way. You'll find a way to do something, you know, because at that time, you know, the economic situation being what it was, sit at home and keep applying for the jobs that weren't there, or do something else. And it sounds to me that you've done the, in Latin, carpe diem, so seize the day. And you know, with humility, because to go in from the level that you were when you're doing international liaison and working with some huge corporates, to come in at the ground level, you know, I don't think anyone or everyone can necessarily take that step backwards. So it's yeah, credit to you really. And
I
um
think it is. Yeah, I agree that not many people will do that because if you are a bit strong-headed that you want to work at that level and there's nothing coming through or difficult to come through, then you have to adjust your expectations.
mm,
And I feel that that transition was the calling. I also feel that this is the space I have truly been myself because it resonates with what I am and what the
mhm,
work what it did. I wasn't always comfortable in the corporate world because it wasn't me.
mhm.
So I feel that whatever transition happened was for the good.
That's beautiful. I heard someone said to me that uh, rejection can be redirection in disguise. And when you said what you said, what came to me was alignment, you know, in terms of your values, your desire to contribute to society, particularly, you know, the elderly who, you know, in your culture, my culture, you know, the elderly are so revered and cared for, that I think it's natural growing up that many of us will have our parents live with us for, you know, and the idea of putting them into care is not one that sits easily with the sort of lived experiences that we have. So I'm really glad that you answered the call to get more aligned and thrive the way that you are. So to talk about your role now as CEO of AGE UK, after that journey from Canada to Ireland on the way back to the UK and now being in the UK, can you share a bit about what the organization's mission is? I mean, it's in the name, but it would be lovely to hear from you, you know, how you see that the mission of the organization.
Yeah, so AGE UK Croydon is an independent charity, a local charity of Croydon for older people, as the name says. However, we do try to support a wider audience, though majority of the people we support tend to be 65 and over.
Mm-hmm.
We do share a brand name with the national charity, and so does 115 other AGE UKs. The good and the great part of it is that we collaborate together across on the same brand. We don't compete with each other. So there are very strict boundaries of work. And that helps because you are not into competition, because it doesn't work through competition. It works through collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And it is important that we work through collaboration because that collective impact, whether it is within Croydon, regionally within the Southwest London, or nationally or all across UK, because the collectiveness is the power of impact. What we do in a small area, and then what you extrapolate that over larger areas, is what the AGE UK brand brings.
Mm.
So we all do our bits in each, and so does AGE UK Croydon does that. So that's the core part of what our mission is, to ensure that we support the local older people in Croydon and keep them healthy as long as possible in their own homes.
Copy.
That's the basic part of it. Majority of the programs are aligned with that purpose, to reduce isolation, to reduce frailty, to make them healthy and continue to empower them so that whatever purpose they have with their age, we help to delay that as much as possible. That means in case they have to go to a care home, they don't naturally navigate into that at an early stage. So we create a support structure so that we can keep them in their place, because that's what they want to do. If I am healthy and I have connections, I would love to stay in my own home. Nobody wants by default want to go somewhere else, right?
No.
So we create that atmosphere with our staffing teams all across Croydon. And our vision, of course, is value engaging, improving lives, and growing community. So those 6 words are powerful enough to guide people to ensure that what we are doing aligns with that purpose.
Yeah, that's a really sort of touching mission, because it's happening to us all. It's coming to a town near all of us. You know, when you get older and have to come to terms, is the way I put it, with the fact that the mind can be in some cases willing, but the body is no longer able or as able. That process in itself is tough. I can feel that, but to be able to support through the work that you know you and the organization does, the prolonging of the enjoyment of that independence, you know, I really see it from a sort of a mental well-being perspective, you know, really just giving people the opportunity to enjoy, you know, the later years. That after all, you know, you worked hard, you pay for this house now, probably, you know, mortgage pay. You want to enjoy it. You don't go stay with Doris or Gareth who love to snore and, you know, have other challenges necessarily until you have to. So thank you for that. And I think some of the to go down a level more, I'm clearly sitting with you on board. I am aware of some of the services that we provide, but could you give people that are listening that may not have that privilege just a flavor of some of the different services that you provide that support that overall mission?
Yeah, so we divide our services into few sections. Our biggest section is called personal independent coordinator. So there are quite a number of coordinators, around 15 to 20 of them, which are spread around Croydon. And Croydon has 6 localities. So we divide ourselves into 6 localities of support. And they all have a certain number of clients they have to reach out, and they get referrals through the process of multidisciplinary teams which they work with. And when I talk about multidisciplinary team, that is a mixture of GP practices, social workers, different other clinical staff who tend to give the referrals to the PICs. In short, personal independent coordinators, we call them PICs. So the PIC service is the largest piece of the puzzle within the AGE UK Croydon services portfolio. The other services are information and advice. So through a small team of that, which starts with the helpline, other people call up, most people actually call up, or some people do walk in. We have a team of people who would do information for them, basically understand what their condition is, what do they need, and look at advising them on pension credits, attendance allowance, and so on and so forth, or a blue badge or whatever, whether people are claiming what they're entitled for. And you'll be surprised that a lot of people don't. And every year we tend to actually raise over £1 million for them.
Wow.
In terms of the benefits which people are entitled for, but either don't know how to claim. So we support that claim for them, which is actually putting more money into their pockets. So that's all free services. All our services at the point of contact has been free till now. So we really don't charge anything. The reason is because till now, most of the services have been contracted to us either through the local council or through the NHS ICBs. So that's really good. Other parts of the services, as I said, to keep people healthy, we have programs which relates to exercise groups, so keeping them healthy, building their body muscle, and keeping them fit. So we run a lot of exercise groups across Croydon and within our space in Thornton Heath. We also have a core befriending service, which is volunteer-led, ensuring that volunteers match up with the older people who needs either an in-person or a call service, reducing isolation. So those are some of the core services which we have been doing. We have a hall which is in Thornton Heath, and they do lots of activities 5 days a week. We run social clubs, we run knitting work groups, we run art groups, we run different games for different people who want to play, whether it's a sitting or table tennis and so on and so forth. And on occasions, we run a lot of other social activities, fun stuff like Valentine's or Christmas Day and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and honestly, it's supremely heartwarming work that the team do operationally with Susan and the others and the other volunteers as well. And one of the ones that really resonated with me was the Memory Tree Cafe.
Yes.
It must have been maybe about a month ago, after our last board meeting, when we were talking about some of the funding challenges, which we'll come on to.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see it in action, and it was just so wonderful to see those that had dementias, Alzheimer's, come in with their carers, be it family member or sort of health professionals, coming with them, and the joy in that fellowship that they had. It was really something special that for me anyway, it really brought it to life. Because I mean, I volunteer on the national level with the telephone service, but I never see the elderly lady. I call her my Auntie Claire. I never see her, so it's a weekly phone call. But to go and actually see people benefiting from that work, I think it really brought it to life, and then has redoubled my desire to do whatever we can to keep it going, really, to keep it going.
Yeah, so dementia services has been, we've been running cafes for quite a long time now, and it's been a bit of a challenge to support and grow that piece. We are part of the Dementia Alliance. Our colleague Susan is a co-chair, and Croydon is actually one of the highest boroughs in London whose diagnosis of dementia is high.
Wow.
The average is 60%. We are at the 74%. That means we are diagnosing more people with dementia in Croydon. So that basically indicates that if we have more diagnoses, we need more services. So it
Right.
is very ironic that we are diagnosing more people, but we are not having enough funds to run services for people who have dementia. It's a
This is
mismatch,
it's a
right?
conundrum and a mismatch. And when you say 74%, just to get behind the numbers a bit more, if I may, 74% of what does that relate to?
So roughly, I believe that within every year, there are about, again, very difficult because I can't remember exact figures, but just for context sake, if we were diagnosing people who were in the previous years to the range of around 600, now we are diagnosing 1,000 plus. So 50% more. But when you say 74%, is that from a cohort of people who would potentially go from who come to the different clinics for dementia? So people who come to a lower level clinics are people who are undiagnosed, people who
Right.
have conditions of dementia, but they're not clinically diagnosed as dementia. Because
Right.
unless you are clinically diagnosed for dementia, you don't tend to get uh, services from the health.
I'm
You
with
can
you.
only get services from health if you're clinically diagnosed for dementia. So a lot of people still are on the fringes of dementia. So they have
Mhm.
dementia, but they can still, since they're doing their life day-to-day stuff, they don't get clinically diagnosed because they are still okay to live independently or have someone along with them,
Right,
right?
right.
So
That makes
once
sense.
you get clinically diagnosed, you start to get other services from the health. And since Croydon, as I said, has a higher diagnosis percentage, and I'll have to give you that exact numbers later because I don't have it on hand.
Well, that's
But
fine.
since it's got higher thresholds of diagnosis, what I'm trying to say is that when people do get diagnosed, then people need to have access to service after getting diagnosed. So there's a
Yeah.
mismatch of that service being available.
And
So
that's
when the pipeline
that
is bigger or higher for diagnosis, and then there's no service, then technically there's a gap now.
no, that and that totally makes is understandable for me insofar as you have a higher level of diagnoses,
Yeah,
therefore you need more services. I
yeah,
suppose what my curiosity was piqued
yeah.
by was is 74%, is that 74% of an
Yes.
age bracket? Is it 74% of attendees to Age UK? Like what does that 74% relate to was kind of where my mind
Yeah.
was going with it.
So that figure came out from recent Health and Care Board presentation. There was a dementia strategy, and that figure came from them. So I think this number figure for Croydon, not just for Age UK Croydon, I'll have to go and pull down from the dementia strategy as to what that number is.
Oh, sure. And I think from a broader level that it's there. It's me, just me being nosy,
Yes.
thinking that
No,
that
no, it's a relevant
74%.
question.
Oh no, but I just wondered if it was 74% of
Yeah.
all people in the Croydon Borough over
Yes.
a certain age, or was it
Yeah.
74% of attendee? So it was just to get that context. But nonetheless, the
What you
mismatch is
said previously is that is Croydon, not Age UK Croydon figure.
okay. So that
Yeah.
that makes it even
Yeah.
bigger than I thought. And that's why I
Yes.
thought, let me understand the dimension of it. Because if it was, the number of people that walk in that
Yeah.
somehow were diagnosed at Age UK, then that's specific to that. But if it's across the borough that we're higher
Yes.
than other boroughs,
Yeah.
then that shows that best will in the world. Educate is not necessarily including interacting with all of those people. So there's
Yes.
many people that could benefit from services if the
Yeah.
provision was there. So I'm knitting it together. So thank you so much for
And
bearing
this
with me.
diagnosis, we are not trained. We in voluntary sector, this diagnosis has to come clinically. So it has to come
Mm,
from health services. And
mhm.
hence it is a Croydon-wide diagnosis than just the AGE UK Croydon's diagnosis.
That makes sense, and this is why I thought let me get clear on that, because I hadn't been aware that Educate Croydon does offer diet. So I was thinking I need to know, I need to do some homework. Now you've explained it, that really helps. And I guess it's progressing the conversation a bit. It's well documented that the economic landscape
Mm,
is challenging at present. In if we stick with the UK, we face
mm,
the challenge of slow growth, rising inflation,
mm,
and an unemployment rate that makes for some somber reading. As I go onto LinkedIn periodically and I see people open to work and desperately trying to get back to using their talents in a way that provides for them and their families. So
mm.
how have some of those challenges impacted the work of AGE UK Croydon?
Yeah, I think last year or so, the environment has been more challenging,
Mm,
and primarily because there has been huge amount of uncertainty,
mm,
both in terms of Croydon Council has been pretty much bankrupt for last two or 3 years,
mhm.
uh, and they've been creating lots of saving plans, and the prime saving plan or the foremost saving plan after focusing on statutory services hits the voluntary sector, which is a non-statutory service for them. So they first and foremost, the axe falls on any funding which they have been funding the voluntary sector to stop.
Right.
That's been the big highlight or headlines for in 2 years before. We were one of the recipients of money from the council to the tune of 350 odd thousand 2 years ago for information and advice, which got slashed pretty much overnight. And now we only get 70,000.
That's
So from a
significant.
large team of information and advice, which we had around 7 people, we're only running from 1.5 staff now for information and advice. The demand is high, and we don't have capacity to fulfill that demand. So that's just
Mm,
one example of how the funding stopped. Uh, from the other funder, which is health, which also now has become one of the key funders. But since last year, they have been also pushed to create savings to the tune of 30%, actually. And this year will be no different in terms of the cuts. And two of our programs recently, 8 months ago, and now end of March, have been stopped again to the total tune of, I would say, around 250 to 300,000, which are
right.
uh, programs called Care Home Connector. Care now in Croydon, just to put into context, there are over 150 care homes. So Croydon is a borough of care homes
Right. Right.
versus
That's a lot.
others. There are lots of care homes here. And we were touching with over 50% of those care homes by connecting the residents into the community, again, reducing isolation, reducing mental health, keeping them fit, and reducing their falls. Because, as you know, in most care homes, the staff are focused on care instead of any kind of social activities. So
Okay.
our staff's job as part of that contract was that, and we did great work. But unfortunately, after 1.5 years, the funding ended, so the program stopped. Similarly, our health hubs, which we have been running for over a year, and 6 of them in Croydon, funding is stopped end of March, and we will have to stop that program too. So those
Right.
are just examples which relates to us as AGE UK Croydon, but there are more examples across voluntary sector.
Yeah. No. It is so um sad to see, when firsthand, but you know more for sure, the impact that it can make, positive impact it can make in terms of service provision, and seeing that sort of taken away, in what in some cases is going to be the last years of some people's lives, to bring them that sort of that joy and that connectivity and fellowship. So yeah, it's a real challenge there. And I think one thing that you talked about earlier was the sort of pressures and how they're different, but still there, corporate versus not for profit. How do you and the team balance the challenge of I guess service provision with the uncertainty of funding? Because one year you get this, and then 30% down, and then completely slash, you get 25% of what you used to get. Like how do you square that
It
circle?
sometimes we do, and sometimes we can't. So it is difficult to say that we are all the time successful. We are not. Where there is always a battle between different levels of the organization, where some people are so passionate and some people understand the business. So there is that constant battle between should we keep the service on? Should we stop the service? Should we continue at least a part of it, if not all? What is our values? What's our mission? What's our purpose? These are all things which go into that melting pot of discussions when we are talking about service cuts, funding cuts, because ultimately we are there to support older people. And the fact is that the demand is much higher than the what each voluntary sector and what AGE UK Croydon can actually do. So there is a mismatch definitely there. How do you plug that is you have to look at it in a wider, bigger context of situation. And when you talk about the corporate world and the voluntary sector, so you have to at times be, I would use word ruthless, because you feel that there is no empathy, because people at the other side feel that, oh, the person on the top doesn't care. It is not about care. It is about existence sometimes. I said about saying that if we don't exist, then we are letting all the people who are connected with us, letting them down. So if we are exist, then we can support, let's say, 4,000, 5,000 people. So the demand still could be double, 6, 7,000, but at least we are supporting and helping some part of it. But if we don't make those harsh decisions, which we at times have to do, then we might not even support 3, 4,000 what we are supporting right now. So it's that balance sometimes you have to make at senior levels to ensure that you're keeping the jobs, you are supporting the people you are supporting, and still aligning yourself with your vision, mission, and values.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal challenge, and what I hear from that is there's that interplay between the emotional and the logical side of keeping the broader entity afloat, sustainable, and able to deliver. When like Memory Tree Cafe for me is something that, oh my god, it speaks to me, whereas another service may speak to someone else, and I can understand now why the role of a CEO in its entirety, particularly in a field where you're reliant on income from external sources that you can't control. It's not like you put more salespeople out there, particularly to go and win big contracts for you. Is a tricky one, because it calls for some sort of detachment from the feelings, it feels like, to really make the best decision in service of the clients that you have, but also keep the concern going in order to help people in the long term, really. So yes, kudos to you for that really.
It is difficult, and you do get blamed at times that you don't have a heart and you don't think for the people. It's not that we don't. We wouldn't be working in the sector if we didn't have empathy or didn't
Yeah.
have care, right? So we do care, but we also have to be strategic. We also have to be realistic, what we can and cannot do. And that's why I think through you is and others, we are trying to look at how do we reach out to different sections of our community to possibly see other sources of funding, whether it is legacy giving, whether people are leaving in their will anything small, big, whatever, to the charity to support wider audiences. Small donations, large donations, corporate donations, paid for services. There are various things in the melting pot at this point in time to
Yeah.
just to kind of look at, because we have never done those kind of things actively in AGE UK Croydon. So it's also a mindset change.
Yeah. Well, change is the one constant, but it's one of the things that we resist the most as people, because usually it's an invitation to grow, but it's disguised as a problem that we don't want to lean into. So I hear you when you say that, and it would be great to sort of explore the ways that can be done. And I wondered, you've listed out quite a few different options there, but for someone watching or listening, to this, like if they wanted to get involved, you talked about the legacy side, and that sadly depends on someone passing away and then obviously donating in that process. But while you're alive, if you want to make a difference to AGE UK Croydon, how can they make donations or fund the work that is done in a way that may free some resources to continue the work, really?
Yeah, donation is very easy. People can do it in person. They can do it via the website. They can do it through Just Giving pages. They can come and give it to us. They can talk to our staff. They can talk to their solicitor if they want to put it in the will. Charitable giving has never been easier for AGE UK Croydon. We are no different. If you love to work in Croydon, you love Croydon, and you love older people, then we are the charity to consider.
Well, I want to make it a global pitch for anyone that's listening. Wherever you are, we will take your money. We don't just need Croydonian money, if that's even a thing. We will take global cash. And so I think actually I have an idea. Perhaps I could put a link in this when it is published. It'll go onto YouTube and then down the line onto some other channels. Maybe I could put a link. Maybe we can get that so that people could click on it and then make some donations. And you never know, we've got some rich listeners out there, or maybe.
You're right, because when I was working in Ireland, it very incidentally, such thing happened, like you done that. I believe that's whether this was through that or through their fundraising team. Fortunately, that organization had a team of fundraisers with them because they raised nearly 50% through fundraising team. And one such initiative happened was that a family in US just by chance came to get to know that organization, and they had connection with Ireland, and they bequested nearly 5 million to the organization.
Oh my goodness, the challenge is set, people. This is why I say we need to go beyond Croydon. I know Croydon has some affluence in some areas of needing development, but can we get 5 million? We get dollars. We need to know what currency we're working with. Okay, we need to beat $5 million.
You can take any currency as long as it's global. It doesn't matter.
I'll take it. Ghanaian cedis, euros. We'll take it. We'll have a little Blue Peter thermometer. That I don't know if you remember that. But yeah, it's necessary because the work you do, on jokes aside, it is so important to give people that enjoyment and independence of later life, really. So for me, thinking about our partnership and our work together, it's been a real pleasure to sit on the board with you and see your leadership style firsthand. One of the things that blew me away on joining was the way in which you really make space for all the voices to be heard, really beautifully, quite like a conductor, but at the same time like the last one, you can be relied upon to stand in, but also zoom into the detail, but also zoom out seemingly effortlessly. So it would be remiss of me, selfish reasons, but also to share with the wider audience, not to ask how you developed your approach to leadership, because as I say, having witnessed it, is something to behold.
Yeah, I think it comes not just through experience. Experience is good because you learn through uh, actually diving into it. As I said, my first CEO role, never done before, was a huge learning curve. And one first 2 years was to understand what people are doing. A lot of people in that organization I worked, we worked 20 years plus, and they would just come and start to manipulate, or this guy has come, he's new, and I'll tell him what to do. And they would
Right.
walk me through and have coffee with me and say, um, so if you need anything, I am the person to get in touch, right? I said,
Hmm.
okay. And it was all, for me, it was all listening. First, to just listen. And because you really don't know who to trust and who not to trust, you come to an
Hmm.
organization of 80 people, 85 people, and everybody wants to be your buddy.
Of course, yeah, everyone wants to be friends with the boss, right?
Yeah. And above that, that organization was fully unionized, except two staff were outside union, rest were all unionized. So that becomes doubly difficult because they were
Mm.
in a union organization, there's a stringent um, rules and regulations how you interact with the staff and what you do and what you don't. Otherwise, they just go to the union, and you could be sitting in front of the union and there will be grievances and arbitration and so on and so forth. So
Hmm. Hmm.
becomes all the more difficult in managing a union versus a non-union organization. So you had to learn fast. You had to pretty much speed dial yourself into your leadership style. And so my three things came out of it was, and I call it ICE,
Okay.
and it's all about integration, collaboration, and engagement. Uh, so integration is to ensure that the whole organization is aligned towards the vision, mission, and values, and we're not working in silos. And I've seen a lot through my charity journey that most organizations still work in a very siloed environment. And not
Mm.
to negate that, but it is very heavily driven from the funding sources. So X funder comes in, say, I need this service, I need you to develop this service. You put a manager, you put your team, and off you go because you are satisfying the need of that funder, right? The
Hmm.
objectives and everything. So you sometimes forget that you're working for the organization, this charity organization, but you by default start to work for the funder.
I'm with you. So you're not seeing the bigger picture, and it's like say you've got the
Yeah,
different agendas, perhaps. So
yeah,
you work support this fund. Yes, I see
yes.
what you mean.
So that becomes one kind of siloed organization within the bigger organization, and then another funder comes and say, I'll fund this, and so that becomes another organization, and that becomes, so over the years there are like 6 different organizations working in one large organization, but
Crazy.
nobody
Yeah.
wants to talk to each other because they're so focused on their bits. So that's was missing. So integration becomes the core focus part of the leadership, how you integrate that whole piece and align them towards that bigger cause, towards the vision, mission, and values. And then collaboration. How do you collaborate not just within the organization, but outside in the community? Because people also have to see you as one organization. It's AGE UK Croydon. It's not pick service. It's not befriending service. It's not memory tree cafe or healthy. It is AGE UK Croydon is what they need to connect with. Yes, they need to be passionate about a piece of AGE UK Croydon, but they are actually connected with AGE UK Croydon. That's the piece which they need to understand.
Yeah.
And engagement. How do we engage? Because engagement is, we are all ambassadors of our organization. So right from the person on the door, whether he's the person who's switching on the light or cleaning or opening the organization door, to the CEO and everyone in between, are ambassadors of the young organization. Hence, their engagement in the community, engagement at strategic boards, engagement with other partners, engagement with stakeholders. It is a piece which is ensuring that it is not just the top person, everybody needs to be part of that engagement.
Yes.
So and on the other flip side, I see that leadership should be staying cool like ice and stay calm like ice.
Oh, I see. So it's like I think a mnemonic, something like that, where yeah, it has a double meaning. So you've got what the different words, letters in it mean, but also it gives you that. And I've seen it. I've seen it. You know, I'm not. We don't have heated board meetings, but you're always very steady. I describe you like a swan. You know, where you're gliding, but I'm sure under the surface you're like paddling really fast because your brain gets to the detail. You know, some of the questions we get on the board, you know, obviously, sometimes will come from different diverse backgrounds, opinions, and so you have to be ready for it all. But I've never yet seen you flustered about a sort of question there. So that's really helpful. And I think just to build on it a bit more, the journey that you've had is so varied and eclectic and just really stands to testament of, I guess, your character, but also your creativity in terms of reinvention of your position. Were you to be able to go back in time and speak to the earlier career version of yourself, what, if any, advice, guidance, conversations might you have with that version of yourself in terms of the things to consider about the onward journey? Now you know what you know now.
If I had known that that's the area I would eventually land up to, I would have done lots of things slightly differently because, like, for example, my education link is not linked with the work I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
All the work or the learning happened, one, on the job, and second, lots of that piece which the theoretical learning and education happened much later in my life.
Mm-hmm.
My social care degree or uh, the housing chartered membership and all that things happened much later, which becomes a huge challenge because if you had done that before, then that learning through education and then experience would have propelled me within the sector differently.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm not satisfied in the journey of where I'm right now. It is that it could be much larger, and my impact would have been much larger had I known where I want to go to. Because it happened midway in my career, it has taken me in a slightly different way. So if I had an opportunity to chat with my old self, that would be the factor, is that how can, because though a lot of people in this country, in UK, feel that education and experience are two separate things. People feel experience is important and education may not be as that important, because a lot of people have progressed in the career where they're not really education. It is through experience they have progressed, right?
Correct.
So, but where I come from, or where even your culture comes from, we have traditionally been grown that education is key part of your growing up.
It's integral. It's
right?
integral. You try to tell our parents that you're not going to university and see what happens. I mean, it's just not. It's not
So
an easy
that's where it
option.
is, right? So we know in India there's huge emphasis on learning, and we feel that both of this needs to go in sync. Education and experience, they're not two different things.
No, I think that this is really interesting and great food for thought, because I see that had you reflected and gone back in time, or gone back in time with the benefit of hindsight and reflection, that could have been a route. And I don't discount that. I also see that when you find your calling, that desire and that passion to really invest in the learning that comes your way or that you seek out can be that much higher than an 18-year-old that goes to university who, I don't know what I want to do. I'm just going to go because I have to. I have to go. But I think when I consider the sort of postgraduate studies that I've done, I'm not messing around. The zeal with which I approach it just connects with me in a different way. So devil's advocate here, just to say that maybe there is no right or wrong way, and maybe everything that you experience prepares you for the next step that you take at the time you need to take it. Because without the corporate experience you brought, to your point earlier, you'll be focused on the giving and the giving and the giving, but not protecting the business as well as you do from a bottom line perspective. So I don't know. I see this beautiful conundrum of life where it's either or, whichever one, really.
Yeah, no, all I'm saying is that if we do this, if you know where your calling is and you align yourself earlier, yeah, I agree, because too early maybe becomes confusing, but at some point in time earlier, then it could be that you are able to deliver that passion, compassion, and experience in a much bigger way. When I say much bigger way, is that today AGE UK Croydon is a 2 million organization, but I could be managing 10 million, 15, 20 million organization, because I feel I have the capacity and the inclination and experience to do it. But I am not in that section of the category right now, because it is a lot of younger CEOs who are in their 40s are doing it, and much doing it probably better than what I would do it in my 60s right now. So I think in that context, I'm trying to say is that calling, had that come early, it could be in a different league. So that's the context I was
And
trying.
that definitely is reasonable and a rational thing to say, because you accelerate with commensurate with the knowledge and experience that you present with, and people will try and say that ageism isn't a concern, but when you're faced with a panel and individuals have perhaps more extensive experience of running larger organizations, and you come against them, then whether it's ageism, whether it's selection by the size that they've run, I hear you insofar as you started running but later in the race than someone else. So that makes sense. And I know I promised you that we'll try and wrap up by 5, but if you have got a minute or two, I did have one final question. We could easily carry on, I'm sure we could, but if would that be okay if I ask one final question?
Yeah.
Great. So the last question that I had, Sanjay, was, when all is said and done, and you decide to stop working and enjoy some independent later living, what would you like to look back and say your legacy has been for AGE UK Croydon, or even personally, any which way you like to take it? Really?
I think I tried as best as I can that when I join the organization and when I leave the organization, I leave it in a much better place than what I found. That would be in legacy. So specific to AGE UK Croydon, as I said earlier, the journey started to ensure that it is one organization, one team. So we started that mantra 3 years ago. And I strongly feel that we've gone huge steps into ensuring that we are seen as one organization, not just seen outside. We believe in it. And a lot of teams now act on it also in the similar way. We have certain gaps and we need to fulfill that gaps. We've started the journey on embedding clients' voices into our service delivery. We last year or so, we did a lot of work on doing a lot of focus groups. So now I think that it's the right time to set up an older people advisory group to ensure that they become the core focus of our learning and growing of the organization, because it's people who actually get the service are the people who define what we need in future, how AGE UK is going to move forward. And the third is that we data is critical for any organization. What data we collect, what data we project, how do we manipulate that data? So for me, it is not just data in data sense, it is data intelligence. So the intelligence piece of the data is more important. So you have to first collect, and then how do you interpret that data into intelligence? And that intelligence will drive to what the gaps are, where the trends are, and how we want to align our service delivery. So these are the three. So one is integration of the whole organization, where I think we've gone a long way. Um, Client embedding is still in transition, so I hope that I can leave that legacy. And third is we have done a lot of work in data, and now the next step is how do we convert that data into intelligence. So those
Fantastic.
will be my legacies kind of within AGE UK Croydon.
Well, it's amazing to hear that you've got that blueprint set out for you, and say you're well on your way with those things becoming a reality. And so, yeah, it's a shame that the time has run out, but I, unlike the people listening, have the benefit of seeing you very soon again, in any case. But it has been a real pleasure just to get a deeper understanding than I even had before of the journey that you've been on, your international adventures, and starting all over again, and not giving up and getting to the top of an organization and making such an impact as you have been. So thank you so much for the time, and let's see if we can get this 5 million. Let's see what we can do.
Thank you, Kofi. It's really a pleasure. And as you said, let's talk and let's evolve, and that's what we've done. It's good that, and you've been a fantastic facilitator. It seems that it's in your DNA for sure, how you facilitated and how you interpret the answers into something different was also a good learning for me. So thank you for giving me your time.
No, my pleasure. I think giving is living is one of my mantras, and I think if there's anything I can do in this platform, fledgling as it is now, is to be able to give back to organizations who are doing such meaningful work that really is a concern for all of us, really, but for publicity, but for PR, could be doing even more. So yeah, the mission is personal, but thank you. I love a chat, I love a chat, so it was no problem when you said yes. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. All right, well, have a great weekend, and we'll catch up no doubt super soon. All right,
okay, take care, and you too have a good weekend. Thank you, Kofi. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sanjay. Bye now.